So that happened a month ago. I went to my grandfather's house with my family. I was spending time with my cousins when my aunt asked me if I can get dye stuff for food from her apartment because there was none in my grandfather's apartment. I say yes, plus it will make me hang out a bit, so I asked my cousin, who was 3 years younger than me, to accompany me. On the way, we discussed about everything. Then as we prepare to enter the building, a man in his 40s, wearing dirty clothes and stinking alcohol and tobacco, comes forward to get in there too. He lets us go first, we say thank you, and we go in the front. So we go up the stairs, but inside of me, I really didn't feel well, without knowing why, and I was afraid and stressed. Yet my cousin pretends like there's nothing wrong and discusses as if the man is not there. So I play the game. You should know that my aunt lives on the top floor, and at this time, there was no one in the apartment. And so we talk while going up the stairs. And I always have these unease in my stomach, and the man is always behind us. While we were talking, my cousin sings something that really shouldn't be said. I don't even know why she said this. "There's no one in the apartment, right?" Then I widen and look at my cousin with a look that means that she really screwed up. Apparently, she didn't feel the discomfort that I had. We arrive at the door of the apartment, and the man was still not far from us. I fasten to open the door and bring my cousin and me inside, then close the door. I blow and argue with my cousin, and she replies by saying that I stress for nothing and that the man is simply here because he lives here, or that he goes to see friends and it happened to be on the top floor. That's when I realize that I may have reacted badly and that my cousin may have been right. So we go into the kitchen to get the dye stuff, except that we hear a strange noise, and it's coming from the door. And then I realized that I did not lock it. I walked to the door to quickly close it and beckoned my cousin to stay in the kitchen. But it was too late. I see the doorknob and the silhouette of the man who was behind us. Livid, I didn't know what to do. The man opened the door, and I regain my senses and tell him to get out of here quickly, but he does not flinch and suddenly starts shouting, "I want my part!" I didn't understand what he was talking about, and I told him again to get out of here before I call the police. And all of a sudden, he starts laughing like a psychopath, and I repeat to him this time but shouting, "Get the hell out of here before I contact the police!" He stops laughing and looks me straight in the eye, and he gradually walks up to me and say, "Where did you hide it? I know that you hid it. Give it to me, and I leave you alone." So I answer, "What do you want?" He takes me by the shoulder and shakes me by telling me all the bad words of the world that may exist, repeating that I have hidden something that belongs to him. And all of a sudden, I hear, "Police! Please let the lady—" Panic. The man pushes me to the side and tries to escape, but it was too late. The police had arrived at the doorstep. So I see them immobilizing the man and making him go down the stairs. I see my cousin coming out of the kitchen crying with a phone in her hand. She's probably the one who called the police, and as if all the stress was falling, I was crying too. We both hugged each other, and the policeman who stayed tried to reassure us, telling us that it's over now. A few days later, after doing an investigation, the police informed us that the man was under several drugs, and the moment we saw him, he was running out of drugs, and he was trying to get it. And what we didn't know is that my aunt's apartment belonged before to a drug dealer. That's why he said that he wanted his share and thought that I had hidden it. Nowadays, I have trauma. I go back several times on the doors to see if it's really closed, and since this day, I have never met this man again, and I hope that this will remain the case.
This memory is pretty fresh in my mind, so I hope that talking about it will help get rid of a bit of grief and fear. Before beginning, if you have any pets, particularly rabbits, please give them a pet from me. I regret not going to see them the morning before it happened. I should begin by giving a bit of context. I, 21-year-old, actually live with my mother, far from town, but we have a few neighbors between the fields. I also have 2 big brothers, but they aren't really relevant to the story, since they haven't been able to go home for months due to the obvious health situation going on. We have no issues with the neighbors, and we sometimes help each other, but a few years ago, we had a problem with anonymous phone calls and destruction of property, trying to make my mum sell the house way below market value, because, quote, a woman can't take care of that much space alone. We have 2 dogs which keep the house safe, and a part of the house has a fence which is the dog zone, which is against the house. So when I open the door, I can let the dogs in. Yesterday, I was studying on my computer just after noon for my upcoming exams, and put the dogs outside since they were play fighting a bit too loudly. A few minutes went by in silence, while I worked with pretty quiet music. Then, suddenly, both dogs began barking really loudly. I was surprised, but thought someone must have been walking on the road, exciting them. So I went to call them back in, when I saw 3 of my 4 rabbits were just before the fence, in line. My dogs going off on the fence and not even touching them, which was weird. My dogs love corpses. If there's even one dead animal on a walk, they will find them and try to chew them. I freaked out and called them back in. I stayed in the house with my dogs, just looking out of the upstairs windows to see if our horse, donkey, and goats were all right. They were. For about an hour, I waited for my mum to come home, too scared to see if my last rabbit was there, and was going off on Discord with my brothers and friends, panicking completely. All of our rabbits' houses were in ruin, as if someone took a hammer to them. Not even one of them was still usable. The door to the dog zone, which was beside the rabbit houses, was open wide, and we found the last rabbit, also dead. We thought that maybe we forgot to close the door, and the dogs made the damage, but the rabbit houses were broken in ways that dogs simply couldn't have made. Then my mum went to check the bodies. Not a single bite or tooth mark, but mainly their necks were broken by hand. They were twisted. So yeah, I don't know who you are, but person who attacked my 4 defenseless rabbits for no reason, let's not meet, or only in court for animal cruelty with a good attorney to get you jail time.
This is something that happened to me 5 or so years ago. I was fresh out of university with my degree in international development. I wanted to help undeserved communities, develop meaningful projects, and see more of the world. I was young. I was naive. Eager to get started, I took one of the first jobs that offered me a position. It wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, but it was adjacent to my interest and, more importantly, took me to a place that I had never been before. I loved everything when I arrived. It was beautiful, sunny, and green. My new coworkers, all local staff, were amazing and so kind. My boss invited me to play soccer on Sundays with his family, and my fellow project coordinator would go out dancing with me on the weekends. My roommate, a fellow expat working in development as well, was a fun and spunky woman that I adored, and I felt so blessed. Then, one day, it changed. I was walking downtown with a friend. There was a vegetable and fruit market that had great fresh produce directly from the farmers growing it. It was about a 20-minute bus ride from my apartment. Not so close, but not incredibly far either. My friend and I loaded up and began walking over to a quiet corner to call a cab to help us haul our goods back. And then I heard it. Hey, miss, shouting my exact address. It took me a second to realize that he was shouting my address. I turned around to see a man hanging out of his car, slowly crawling along the road with us. My friend recognized my address too, so she turned to me and asked, "Do you know him? I've never seen him before. He kept shouting." "Yeah, you're living in the back house on the second floor, right?" That made it even worse. I lived in a big suburban lot with 2 houses, one in the front, where my landlady and her family lived, and the second in the back. The second house was split into 2 apartments. The bottom floor housed 2 students, while I lived on the second floor with my roommate. You couldn't see the second house from the road, much less the stairway that led to the second floor. My heart was pounding. I wanted to shout back at the guy, but I was scared. I was a 22-year-old woman living in a foreign country, and I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't know how people would react, and I didn't know how he would react. So we walked. My friend tried to comfort me, saying that maybe he knew my landlady's family. I was probably the only redhead in the whole country, and he could be a neighbor that I hadn't met. The encounter didn't leave me, though. It stayed in my mind. A week or so passed, and I stopped glancing behind my back whenever a car drove by, and I started to feel secure again. But then he showed up again. I was walking home from work, and it was getting dark. My office was a 15 to 20-minute stroll from my apartment. Perfect as a quick way to stretch my legs. I was halfway home when I felt someone watching me. Then, the slow crawl of a car sliding up beside me. I knew it was him without looking. "Miss!" Shouting my address again. He was leaning out of his window, one hand on the wheel. "Why are you shy?" I ignored him and kept walking. There was no one around and it was getting dark. "Come on," he cajoled. "Let me give you a ride. I know where you live." Not reassuring. I started to feel my chest tighten. I wanted to call someone, but I didn't know what he'd do if I reached for my phone. I was practically jogging now, but he sped up to match my pace. "Listen, bitch." And now he was angry, his voice hard. "You don't just ignore a man like that." I wondered what I'd do if he stopped the car. He looked fit, young, and he could probably catch me, and he could hurt me. So I did something that in retrospect seemed absolutely bizarre. I yelled at him, wildly, rapidly. I did it in my first language, not what they spoke in this country, and not a language he would have ever heard, probably. I screamed curse words and threats, anything that I could think of. And I'll never forget the confused fury on his face. But he did slow down, letting me run ahead. I could see a woman at a bus stop at the intersection ahead. If I got to her, maybe she'd help. Maybe he'd get scared off. By the time I got to the woman, he was gone, and I kept walking, looking behind me with every step. I told my roommate about what happened, and she told me not to bother reporting it to the police, since they were corrupt and wouldn't really do anything. When I told my boss, he told me the same. He said that he had a baseball bat and he would come whenever I called. I saw the man again 2 weeks later, and he was sitting in his car, parked in front of the gates to my apartment. I had been about to take out the trash, but retreated before he could see me. I told my landlady, and when she went over to confront him, he drove off. This continued for weeks, not every day, but once or twice a week. He was always there, waiting. I took cabs to and from work, and I never traveled alone. I barely slept, waiting for him to break in and kill me. My last weekend abroad, he almost did. I went out drinking with a group of my friends, 4 of us in total, and we were celebrating the end of my contract, and I was happy to go home in a few days. I couldn't wait to see my family, and I couldn't wait to put an ocean between me and the man. We had beers at a local bar, a 5 to 10 minute walk max from my apartment. When it started to get late, around 1, we tried to get a cab, but it was impossible. The roads were jammed and people were everywhere outside, and cabs couldn't even get to us. So we thought, even though others warned us not to, let's walk home. It would be faster than calling a cab, and we'll be fine. We're a group of 4, and no one will hassle us. We got halfway there when we had to cross a main road. There were no streetlights, not that kind of place. The road was absolutely empty, and not a single car in sight. We crossed the road, a few more minutes, but then we were backlit with bright headlights of a car coming up. We glanced back. A cop car, 2 men in the front, and I knew, even though I couldn't see him from the bright lights in my eyes, he was driving. He was a cop! The Jeep slowed, as I knew it would. He rolled down the window to drawl. "Hey, miss," saying my address. "Nice night, yeah?" My friends immediately knew who he was. I could see how nervous they were. We were alone on a dark, empty street in the middle of the night. They were cops, so they were armed, and no one would intervene, probably. It was too dangerous. "You girls need a ride?" He leered. His friend, who I could see now, was grinning hugely. My last few days, I thought, as this is how it ends. And I don't know what our plan was, other than to get away. Then I heard one of the doors of the Jeep open as the passenger jumped out. I don't think I have ever been so scared in my life, although I didn't dare turn back to see. We were at the turn to my street now, 2 minutes more to get to safety. The car was right behind us, and whoever had gotten out of the car was right behind us too. 2 of my friends were ahead now, while another clutched my hand and dragged me along. Then, out of nowhere, another car appeared. They were coming from the opposite direction, illuminating us all. When they slowed to see what was going on, I've never been so grateful. It was an older couple, and they looked concerned. I think they knew something very bad was about to happen. Then I heard, not saw, the car door swing open. I almost got hit as they sped past us in a hurry, and the other car stayed, watching. They offered to escort us home, driving alongside us just in case, but I knew he wouldn't come back. Not tonight. I still took a cab with my friends to their place for the night, and we took my roommate with us just in case. Nothing happened after that, and my last 2 days were uneventful, although I couldn't shake the feeling that he might show up at any given moment, driving the airport, all packed up and ready to go home. My cab got pulled over by a cop. My stomach dropped, and I couldn't breathe. It wasn't him, although it could have been. It wasn't until that I got on the plane, until I landed in my home country, that I finally felt the terror leave me. I still get nervous when cars drive up behind me, when men roll down their windows to shout at me. It's never him, but still, you never know. So let's not meet again. stranger who knows where I live.
I'm an overnight security guard for a large building at the parking ramp. It's generally a really quiet job with a lot of free time, but occasionally I do have to kick out homeless people. It's a horrible part of the job, and I do my best to direct them to the next safest place to sleep. Most people are understanding, as they unfortunately go through this a lot. If anything, they want to vent, and I try to be an open ear. Our protocol is to ask them to leave. Then if they don't, tell them to leave. And if all else fails, we have to contact the police. I've only once gotten to that last step. It's important to note my general routine at work. I sit in a shack in the parking ramp for an hour. Then I go for a walk around the building. And then back to the shack. The doors are all locked, but there's an entryway with an ATM that's open 24/7. This is usually where I find people looking for a place to sleep. For more context, I'm a smaller woman and unarmed. On this night, there was a woman trying to sleep by the ATM. I followed protocol, and after the first 2 warnings, I had to contact the police. She yelled at me, which is out of the normal but understandable considering her position. It must be frustrating being constantly kicked out of every semi-safe place. The police arrive, and because I was a little scared, I always am, I watched from the inside of the building, out of view, to make sure they got her out. If she was yelling at me, she was full on screaming at them. This goes on for about half an hour before she leaves the building. Unfortunately, that's all the cops are required to do, so she makes her way to the bus stop right outside. The problem with this is the bus stop is parallel with my shack. She just sits there and stares at me with hatred in her eyes. This gets uncomfortable pretty quickly, so I decide to take another walk. When I'm passing the door that leads out to my shack, I decide to take a peek out of the little door window. I don't normally do this, but I felt uneasy knowing she was probably still in the area, and it's a good thing I did. I can just barely see it, but behind my shack, I see the slightest wobble. There she was, hiding right behind my shack. It's not a big thing, maybe a 10-foot cube, made of large windows and metal, right at the entrance of the parking ramp. I have no doubt she was waiting for me. I call the police, and just keep watching from the little window in the door. While I'm waiting, she eventually lets out an angry scream, kicks the miscellaneous junk in front of the shack, and storms up the stairwell in the parking ramp. For an extra kick of anxiety, the floor above me had a broken door that wasn't locked at the time. Eventually, police get there, and after some harsh words, they get her to leave again, and this time, she walks off into the night. What really scares me was what I found on my next walk. There's a mirror next to the door I was watching her from. I couldn't see it from the inside, but from this side it was obvious. She had broken the mirror into a large piece that was missing. Maybe I've allowed my anxiety to build all this up in my head, but from my perspective, she had taken a large, sharp object, hid behind my shack, and waited for me to walk up. You tell me if I'm overreacting. But to my nameless potential assailant, I wish you better times and a bed to sleep in, but I also hope we never meet again.
When I was 18, my first full-time job was being a shift manager at a pizza place. The job was short-lived and in a particularly shitty part of the city, located across the street from a major hospital and just behind a homeless shelter. We dealt with our fair share of interesting vagrants. For context, I'm a very small woman and have always looked a lot younger than I am, and at that age, I was pretty people-pleasing and non-confrontational, so I definitely handled the situation poorly. It was mid-morning around Christmas time and cold and gray outside. Everything was covered in snow and ice, and I was standing against the wall outside in the back smoking a cigarette. I saw a man emerge from behind the dumpster across the parking lot. He was dressed in nothing but paper hospital clothes and soiled grippy beige socks. He was thin and pale, and his face was sunken in, and he started stumbling across the parking lot. The guy approached me and started mumbling gibberish. His eyes were all glazed over and empty looking. I just kind of stared at him for a second, unsure on how to react. Out of nowhere, he said in a loud voice, "Give me your lighter." No. I started putting my cigarette out on the wall behind me, and the guy reaches for my lighter out of my hand. I jerked my hand away from him, and he grabbed my wrist. At that point, I got out of his grasp and yelled, "Don't touch me! Get the hell away from me!" His arms went limp and he started mumbling, I'm sorry, and started pleading to use my lighter, saying he just got out of the hospital and needs to smoke a cigarette and he'll be on his way. At that point, I just didn't want a confrontation and wanted him to go away. So I handed him my lighter and told him that I needed it right back. He took my lighter, lit up a cigarette, and proceeded to open up the front of his paper pants. He was wearing nothing underneath, of course, and tried to stuff my lighter down his pants. I started yelling at him, told him to give it back and to get the hell out of here before I call the cops on him. He thrust his hands onto the wall behind me, cornering me, and started screaming in my face just complete nonsense. I had a pocket knife on me, and I reached in my pocket and pulled it out. Just then, my boss, a big old guy, flung the door open and came over yelling, "Is there a problem out here?" The hospital guy stepped back, sputtered and yelled one last thing. "Santa Claus is watching, kid! Just you wait. Santa Claus is watching!" All his muscles went kind of limp again, and he got that glazed over look in his eyes, like they just went kind of dead. He then stumbled away just as strangely as he came, and my boss and I went inside. I ended up quitting 2 weeks later. I was there alone after hours counting the drawer down during an attempted break-in. So, hospital escapee, let's not meet.
When I was probably 11 or 12, I was being babysat by one of my mum's friends. One day, she left me with her, but we had to go run an errand. My mother's friend was diabetic and had a few toes missing on both feet, so she was always in a wheelchair. I can't for the life of me remember the other lady that was with us. She used those medical transport vans or buses to get to her appointments. We had to go to a government building for her social security or something. Everything went good in the building and nothing weird had happened. But I was on high alert because we were in downtown Cincinnati and it can get a bit scary down there, especially when you're only 11 or 12. We were waiting for her transport van when an older man, probably in his 40s, and who looked like he was on drugs, came up to me. I looked at him weird because he smelled really bad and had long hair but was balding on the top, so had that riffraff from Rocky Horror look. He comes up to me and grabs my arm, looks me dead in the eyes and asks, "How's your mum doing?" I knew damn well that this man did not know my mother, and I had never seen him before in my life. I paused and went into shock, and the only thing I could mutter out was, "She's fine?" I was extremely confused. That's when my mum's friend had stopped talking and looked over. After I had answered the guy's question, he starts to pull me towards him, like he was trying to run away and he was going to take me with him. My mum's friend yelled as loud as she could, and it had gotten this man's attention. He was obviously scared as he dropped my arm. I had a red mark on my arm because of how hard he was squeezing it. The guy took off running, and we called the cops. I explained everything to them, and that's the last I heard about it. I don't remember the cops even doing a follow-up. After that, my mum didn't let my friend watch me anymore, because it had scared her and myself so bad that I didn't want to go anywhere with her friend again. So creepy man who tried to kidnap me, let's not meet again.
In 2017, in my last semester of high school, some friends and I decided to skip the pep rally for the girls' varsity basketball team making the playoffs for the first time. My last period of the day was theater tech. I was just taking it as fine arts credit, and 2 friends of mine in the grade below me were in that class as well. We decided to skip the pep rally, leave school early, and go to the nearby Taco Bell like we did every day. However, administrators and security guards patrol the parking lots to catch kids trying to skip, so we took a detour through the nature trail on campus in order to avoid them. Once in the nature trail, we came across this kid that I hadn't seen before. He was a skinny white kid with shaggy black hair, wearing baggy jeans and a plain white t-shirt. He was shorter than me, but the most notable thing about him was his general look of dishevelment. His hair was wild and full of leaves and twigs, and his plain white t-shirt was dirty, and the knees of his jeans were stained green and brown. He seemed like he had been crawling around the nature trail, and I remember wondering if he lived there for a split second. When we came upon him, we were walking one direction, parallel to the school and to the back of the parking lot, and he was coming directly toward us. I knew the nature trail well enough to know there was a bend that led deep into the woods, and I figured that he had come from there. He was out of breath and he looked really scared. My 2 friends said hi to them. My friends were in the grade below me and later told me that that kid was in their grade and was just acquaintances with my 2 friends. It was supposed to be just a quick hello, but I couldn't help but notice how scared he looked and how suspicious he seemed of us. He asked us what we were doing in the woods, and we told him that we were skipping the pep rally. One of my friends asked, "What have you been doing out here? Camping?" Me and my other friend gave a nervous laugh, but the kid didn't crack a smile. He explained that he was dropped off at school that morning and was supposed to get on a bus to take him to DAEP. DAEP was the alternative school that kids who got suspended from school went to. His plain outfit started to make sense now. It was the infamous uniform of the alternative school. He then explained that he didn't want to go to the alternative school, so when his mom dropped him off, he pretended like he would wait for the bus, and then he hid in the nature trail for the full 8 hours of the school day. He was still acting really skittish, and without even looking at each other or speaking to each other, my friends and I could feel that something wasn't right and that we were in some kind of danger. The kid looked around nervously often, as if seeing if someone might have followed us or if we were alone in the woods. We hit him with a, "All right, man. Well, good luck. We're trying to get to our cars and go home before the pep rally ends." When he heard the word cars, he perked up. He started walking with us towards the parking lot, continuing to talk, and he becomes a lot more friendly and asks if we can give him a ride home. We give him some half-baked excuse on why we couldn't. We didn't expect him to ask that, and I never met him and my friends barely knew him. But he doesn't take no for an answer. He tells us that people were going to start looking for him pretty soon and that he was going to be in a lot of trouble. We tell him that he'd probably be fine hiding there that deep in the nature trail. But he tells us, "Nah, man, you don't understand. I broke into a car at the fellowship." He pointed in the direction of the mega church that had a parking lot that backed up to my school. "I took this." From his waistband, he pulled out a handgun, and I felt sick to my stomach. I had never seen a gun in real life, and at this point, I really felt in danger. Not just because he had produced a gun, but I had never really been scared of them. More so that the entire interaction felt uneasy, and that the guy was already unsettling and desperate. One of my friends very cautiously tells him that he should probably just ditch it and take off somewhere. And he just stood there, staring at us for an uncomfortable amount of time. His eyes were meeting each of ours, and I broke the silence by saying that we wouldn't tell anyone, but that we really had to go before the pep rally ended. And my other stupid-ass friend, who had been virtually silent the entire time, spoke up and said, "Yeah, and it's best we're not around if they start looking for you for that," gesturing to the handgun. His eyes narrowed, and once more he asked if one of us could take him home. This time, it felt more like a command. I have never been a super brave person, but in that moment, I don't know why, I just blurted out, "Nah, man, I'm good." Again, there was an uncomfortable silence. Then he asked, "Before you leave, do you guys want to see something?" My first friend was kind of a hothead, and although he was uncomfortable with the situation, he was not afraid of conflict, nor was I. My other friend, however, was not a fan of conflict and would always de-escalate first. We all looked at each other, and me and my first friend kind of had an unspoken understanding, like, if this is going to happen, we have to run or fight. We might have to do it now. My other friend was very visibly afraid. He asked, "What do you want to show us?" And before the kid could answer, my first friend said, "We don't want to see. We have to go." My first friend started briskly walking past the kid, and me and the other friend quickly followed. Within a few steps, we just started sprinting towards the parking lot. I looked back once we were about 50 steps away. I looked back, and he was still standing there, watching us run. He had put the gun back in his waistband before taking a small adjacent trail back deeper into the woods. By the time we made it into the parking lot, there were police everywhere. We were sweating, out of breath and terrified, and they found the kid in the next 10 minutes. Somehow, in the chaos, nobody saw us exit the nature trail and into the parking lot. But since there were so many cops in the parking lot, we decided to just head back inside through another side door to find that the door was locked. That's when an administrator found us, brought us inside, and shoved us into a classroom where we were able to talk with the others and find out what was going on. That is what we could piece together from what we learned. Turns out, that kid had skipped DAEP, hid in the nature trail, broke into a car at the church, and stole a semi-automatic shotgun and a handgun from the car. After stealing the guns, he texted his girlfriend and told him that he was about to do something really terrible and that when she saw his name on the news, she should turn off the TV. He told her explicitly that he was going to kill kids at school. She knew he was supposed to be in DAEP and was so worried about the text that she contacted the police. The DAEP went on lockdown until officers got a call from a guy at the church that 2 handguns had been stolen from his car behind the school. And that's when we put 2 and 2 together and caught him hiding in the woods. I guess when he saw me and my two friends in the nature trail, he quickly hid the shotgun, but didn't have time to hide the pistol, or didn't care enough to hide it.
So my fiance and I have been on the lookout for a kitten to accompany our 3-month-old kitten we already have. We searched and searched until one day he said to me, "Let's look on Craigslist." So I did, and we found the perfect one. But the only problem was, it was 2 hours and 30 minutes away from our home. I inquired about it around 10:30 p.m. I know it was late, but almost immediately I got a response. She sounded very nice over text and asked to see where I lived so that she would feel settled about the kitten living with us. She also insisted on going to their house. I know, I should have dropped it. At the time, I thought nothing of it. So I sent them a video and we set up a time for the next day to meet. The next day came. I wasn't going to take my fiance, but he insisted on coming with me because he wanted to be my protection since Craigslist is sketchy. So we started the 2.5-hour drive. As we were on our way, I was texting the girl that we would get there on time, and she responded, "Great, see you then." We arrived to the home, me in the driver's seat and my fiance in the passenger seat with the window down. I texted the girl and I got no response. I called and no response. I ended up calling 5 times and texting in the course of an hour and no response. I went up to the house and knocked on the door. Nothing. Their car was in the driveway, but no response from the number or the door. We got there at 6:30 and waited until almost 8. Nothing. The neighbor came out asking what was wrong. I said I'm here since I inquired about a kitten, and she said, "A kitten?" I said, "Yes, it was an ad on Craigslist." She said, "No one has kittens in this home though." I showed her the ad, and she said, "Oh, I know them. They are very sketchy people. They don't own any cats. I just helped them move their furniture yesterday." So I said, "Well, on their ad, it says that they have to get rid of their kittens since their new place doesn't allow pets." To which the neighbor replied, "That's impossible. I have a dog, and so does the next door over." I immediately found this creepy and assumed that the neighbor was also in on something, since it was too creepy and I was feeling anxious. I thanked her and left her along with my fiance. Literally immediately when we pulled out of the street, I get a text from the girl saying, "I'm just now getting your messages. Something must be wrong with my phone. Did you still want the kitten or no?" I didn't answer and we headed back home. What I don't understand is, they didn't get any money from me, but they asked me to show up, not knowing I'd be with my fiance. I had a bad feeling about it. What did they want from me?
I, a European woman, am currently staying in a South American capital. Being a foreigner, I guess I stand out a little bit, but I didn't feel threatened or in danger at all during the month that I spent here. Until yesterday. I was waiting for the bus alone at around 3 p.m. on a sunny day. No one else was around. Then, some guy appeared in the distance. I can't really say why, but he looked shady. Probably because he looked like he was walking straight towards me, even though the pavement was pretty wide. I pretended that I didn't see him and waited for him to pass by. But he came to me, asking for money. I answered very firmly that no, that I didn't have anything to give him, and stepped back a little, keeping my head up and trying to show that I was not disturbed. He kept coming closer to me, making me feel very uncomfortable, and started pointing his finger at my face, saying, "I will kill you, I will kill you, I will kill you," repeatedly. That's when I started thinking that I might be in danger, Even if the guy didn't have any visible weapon, I had no idea what he was capable of, especially as he was extremely close to me and was threatening to kill me. Still, trying to calmly walk away from him so as not to show him that I was panicking, I looked all around for someone who might help me, but the street was still desert. The guy kept following me, still saying, "I will kill you." That's when I saw a bus coming. I waved at it, and the doors were already open. I climbed in without looking back, and the driver's assistant told me to hurry to get in. He had seen the scene from a distance, and he told me not to worry, that we just needed to get away from the crazy guy. This all happened in the span of 30 seconds, but a lot could have gone wrong in such a short amount of time. And I'm glad that I remain relatively calm, and I'll probably invest in a pepper spray for the future. I used to be a nurse at a mental institution, which meant I had to deal with people who keep freaking out or were just straight up delusional. I didn't have a car yet, so I either went home by taxi or walking, but I mostly stick to walking to home, as getting a taxi just wastes money. One night, I left and started walking home. I always liked walking by myself since it's so much peaceful than the place I work at. I was only minutes away from my home when I noticed a silhouette of a person standing under the street lamp. I stopped for a second before continuing my walk home. However, the more I got closer, the more I could see the person clearer. It was an overweight woman with pale skin and long straight blonde hair. She also looked a bit towering, and there were two things that was completely off about her. The first thing was that she was literally completely nude and only wearing black rain boots. The second thing was the mask she wore. It resembled a cat and looked like it was made out of porcelain. I stopped again and looked at this weird woman. Why is she naked at a cold night? And why is she wearing a cat mask? Uncomfortable, I decided to cross the road onto the other side of the street, and I don't know what I was thinking making that decision. I looked back at the woman and noticed that she was now looking at my direction, still standing under the light. I looked away and started walking, but a little fast. That's when I heard speeding footsteps towards me. I looked back, and to my shock, the woman was now sprinting at me with something in her right hand. It looked like a meat cleaver or something. In my sneakers, I immediately ran fast as hell. I was so terrified that I wasn't walking to my home anymore. And without looking behind me, I can hear her almost catching up to me despite her being fat. I was running for my life for about 3 minutes, and now I lost her. Or so I thought when I heard her footsteps coming again. I luckily found a large bush to hide in as soon as the woman stopped to where I was at. Then she began sniffing. I know it sounds weird, but that was exactly what she was doing. She kept doing this for almost a second before giving up and walking away, along with letting out an annoyed growl. I stayed in the bush until the coast was clear, and I contacted my friend to pick me up and drive me home, but kept what just happened to me a secret. After that was the first and last time that I have ever seen this lady. I would always think of theories of who she is. She could either be high on some kind of drugs or was just completely insane. I don't know. So, to the naked fat woman with a cat mask who tried to attack me, I hope we never encounter each other again. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I would also like to thank my following patrons: Ralph, Tasha, Fire05, Gabriel, Eskimono, Silver Threads, Sevenfold, Moschino, and Lori. Thank you very, very much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you want to support the channel further, you can be a patron too. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. Instagram and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.